Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Becomes the God of Hyperdeath and Takes Revenge on Everyone Part 2. Before we start, please go support Zack-Oblivion for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Deku is a male in this story. Chapter 15. New Friends and Instability. We can see the two mysterious subjects that appeared in the previous chapter in front of Fel and Virus, willing to protect Izuku, who was on the ground with almost no magic and seriously injured. The scene changes showing both subjects revealing their appearances. The first was a boy between 15 or 17 years old. He had white hair and slightly pale skin, his eyes were blue with a slight purple glow. The other was a boy of approximately 10 to 12 years old. He had the same white hair and pale skin, but unlike the other subject, this one had blue eyes shining with life and happiness. They looked seriously at their opponents in front of them. It should be noted that both Fel and Virus were already on their last legs, their bodies full of wounds, and their magic reserves were on the floor. There was a great tension in the atmosphere, as well as a deathly silence, which was broken when the older white-haired man spoke. I recommend that you surrender. In the state you are in, you will not be able to do anything against us, he said in a serious tone. At what the white-haired young man said, both Fel and Virus became so enraged that several veins began to appear on their faces. Fel, damn son of a hitch, don't underestimate us, we can defeat you without problems, he shouted in anger. Despite his wounds and tremendous magic drain, the red-eyed man did not seem willing to abandon the fight or give up. The simple fact that he was going to lose infuriated him. Virus, Fel, don't be an idiot, you can barely stand up, it's best that we leave, he shouted angrily to his partner. Fel, shut your bucking mouth, Virus, he demanded furiously. Fel, in a state of total fury, thoughtlessly launched himself against his opponents. He would create a Geister blaster that would fire a beam of magic weaker than the previous ones due to his lack of magic. The older white-haired boy simply created a shield of bones that easily protected him and the boy next to him from the attack due to the impact of smokescreen rows that did not allow them to see. However, they did not count on the fact that Fel would appear next to the blue-eyed boy with an extremely sharp bone in his hand and with an expression of fury and bloodlust, with the obvious intention of stabbing him. The little boy was in shock when he saw how the red-eyed man was just centimeters away from stabbing him. Everything began to happen in slow motion for him, but suddenly hundreds of bones came out of the ground and completely pierced Fel's body, leaving the bone millimeters from the little albino's neck. Who was stupefied to see such an act and by reflex, turned to see his companion who was seriously looking at Fel's already dead body with a serious look and his hand outstretched, taking it for granted that he had been responsible for such an act. Why did you do that? Don't you think you went too far? He demanded angrily. Blue, I understand that you don't like this killing thing, but you have to understand that it's the only way we can deal with these guys. There's no prison that can hold them for even a single day. You'll understand when you grow up, this is the best for everyone, I explained in a serious but at the same time wise and comforting way, looking at the one now known as Blue. The boy just lowered his head and nodded slightly. Even though he didn't like this method, he knew it was what they had to do in order to save the others. At that, something caught the attention of the older white-haired man. He pointed something to Blue with his index finger. He turned to where his friend was pointing and saw in surprise how Fel's already dead body was quickly turning into dust. Once his body disappeared completely, only an inverted white heart could be seen in its place. Blue, that's his soul, he said without taking his eyes off the floating heart. But then a strange little dark portal appeared behind the soul and absorbed it completely before immediately disappearing, leaving the white-haired man surprised and unable to say anything about what they had just seen. Blue, but what just happened? He asked himself, very confused. I don't know, but wait, what about the other one? He said excitedly to look where the white-haired man with wings was before, only to be surprised that he was no longer there. Blue, outer, I can't feel your magical presence for miles, the virus has fled, he said to the person now identified as Outer. Outer sigh, well, it would be better if we took the Izuku of this land with the others, he is too injured from his previous fight, he said looking at an unconscious green-haired man a few meters behind them. Both would approach the unconscious boy so that Outer could carry him on his back and then both would disappear thanks to their respective teleportations. In the UA dormitories. Both albinos appeared in the room before the surprising gaze of everyone, including those of the other Izukus who looked at them happily. In the room, a somewhat tense atmosphere could be felt, in addition to a somewhat uncomfortable silence, but before someone said anything, those of Class 1 got into a fighting stance, in case the two strangers, for them, tried something. Obviously this action slightly bothered the albinos and elicited a heavy sigh from Cross. Lita. Who are you and what are you doing with our comrade? The four-eyed man demanded. Before Outer or Blue could even digest anything, a certain white-haired man dressed in purple approached them with a cheerful smile. Epic Outer Blue, it's good to see you again. The boy, now in front of the older albino, greeted happily. Upon seeing Epic, he smiled back as he shook hands with his counterpart. Outer, it's also a pleasure to see you again, old friend, although I would prefer it to be in a situation that doesn't involve all the O's. She said in a somewhat nervous manner. Epic Jeej, and you can say that again, my friend. By the way, why did it take so long to arrive, was there too much traffic? He joked without losing his smile. At what Epic said, Blue couldn't help but let out a small laugh, while the other's eyes formed an anime-style tear. Outer, in our defense, it cost us too much to find this O, it is too far from the other alternate universes, we even had to receive help from Ink to get there. He defended himself with a nervous smile. Epoch Jeej, whatever you say, but leaving jokes aside, we should take care of him. He said, pointing to a badly wounded Izuku. Outer was startled upon realizing this and then gently placed Broccoli's body on a nearby couch, all under the watchful and confused gaze of Class 1A. Before anyone could digest anything, Delta got there first. Delta Peden, please rest assured, they are Outer Izuku and Blueberry Izuku, they are our friends. He explained simply, relieving the aspiring heroes. Outer, noticing the young people's gazes, he and Blue approached them with a smile. Outer, hello, I think we're off to a bad start. I'm Outer Izuku, but you can just call me Outer. Kind regards. Blue, nice to meet you, my name is Blueberry, but you can call me Blue. She exclaimed with an energetic attitude and a cheerful smile. Uraraka small and kawaii Deku. She thought, blushing seeing the chibi and kawaii version of Izuku. Before anyone could speak, the door was smashed and three beautiful girls came in, looking for a certain Broccoli. Alyssa May Najire, where's Izuku? The three of them exclaimed at the same time, very worried about their boyfriend, ignoring the presence of the two new albinos. Pros tranquilas, it's there. He said, pointing to the couch where an unconscious green-haired man was. Immediately the three young women appeared in front of their partner who was unconscious and seriously injured. May, how are you? She demanded an answer from the nearest Izuku, this being Delta. Delta, his wounds are quite serious, but they are healing thanks to the soul of kindness he possesses, although he is healing at a very slow speed, also his magic reserves are almost completely empty, but what is truly serious now is the state in which his soul is. I finish explaining. But this did not relieve the girls at all, on the contrary it made them even more worried. Najire would take the orange-eyed boy by the shoulders to start shaking him nervously. Najire. What is happening to his soul? Tell us right now. She ordered, very worried about her partner. Delta took her hands, separating her from him and then looking at her seriously. Delta, what's happening to Hyper is something very complicated, so I'll try to make you understand, in a few words, his soul is unstable. He said seriously. At what the albino boy with metal gloves said, everyone was confused except for his other versions that continued to follow, even Blue. May Edo, what do you mean by his soul is unstable? I asked, confused but also worried. Delta Viren, each person has a soul, which is the culmination of our being. There are 7 types of soul which are determination, courage, justice, kindness, patience, integrity and perseverance. Each person has some type of these souls depending on their personality, however the case of Hyper is special, he possesses the 7 types of souls, plus the one he chose. This soul is extremely dangerous, since it can consume its bearer being the soul of hatred. Hyper, by possessing the soul, plus the others manage to keep his hatred at bay, so as not to be controlled, however that hatred is now being released, even the other 7 traits together are having problems controlling that darkness, because of this his soul at the moment is very unstable. If we do not solve this problem as soon as possible, well the Izuku's bad guys will be the least of our problems. I finish explaining with a serious expression. Everyone present, except the Izukus, were totally shocked to hear what Delta said. Those who were once their friends were stupefied by the newly revealed information, while the trio of girls were shedding tears, but then a certain brunette asks a question that leaves her friends thoughtful. Uraraka, but Deku-kun was always a noble person who does not hesitate to help others, no matter what kind of person they are. How is it possible that he could possess hatred? She asked without getting out of her shock. Her friends and classmates looked at her in surprise. Delta was about to say something, but was interrupted by his black and white partner. Oh, I don't know, maybe it was because a certain group of idiots without a shred of brain preferred to believe a video that came out of nowhere than their own friend and then throw him into the sea, as if he were a simple rag without even caring if he survived. He said in a tone as cold as ice. At Cross's harsh and cold words, those from Class 1 lowered their heads, however the brunette said something that increased the boy's anger. Uraraka, you don't know anything. She said in a whisper with her head down. This did not go unnoticed by Cross, who with great fury approached the girl at a slow pace while gradually releasing his killer instinct, scaring her greatly. Cross-L told me everything. He exclaimed with venom in his voice. That simple phrase left Uraraka static, who didn't move, almost looking like a statue. Pros, let's review the facts. He saved your life from that robot, you supposedly trusted him, and to top it off you were and still are in love with him. He said with a serious face and his words full of venom. That last thing surprised everyone in the room, especially the aforementioned girl who immediately looked at the mixed-eyed man in astonishment and with a blush on her face. Uraraka, how did you? She tried to ask but was interrupted. Pros, please, it's more than obvious, just by looking into your eyes I can tell, you don't have to be a genius to realize something so obvious. He said with a slight smile and a mocking tone, something very rare in him. Prospero, returning to the main topic, you still didn't trust him with all that, not only did you betray him, but in doing so you destroyed his heart, which was the straw that broke the camel's back and generated all his hatred that is now trying to take over him. He finished saying with a voice as cold as the ice of a certain bi-colored emo. Uraraka could only keep her head down as she shed a few tears and light sobs could be heard from the girl as the albino looked at her with boredom and disgust. Pros, pathetic. He said as he turned around. The brunette, unable to bear it any longer, ran straight to her room, slamming the door shut, all under the sad and surprised gaze of her classmates and friends. Epicetto, don't you think you went a little too far? He asked his friend, somewhat uncomfortable with the situation. Pros, me doesn't care, he deserves it for his stupidity. He exclaimed without a shred of regret. While all this was happening, something was happening in the freckled man's mental space. In Izuku's mind. We can see our broccoli walking confusedly down the street aimlessly. After a few minutes of walking he came to a park where he saw 3 children hitting and bothering another one who was on the floor with his hands covering his face. Izuku could not clearly define the children's characteristics as they were just black silhouettes, but ignoring this, he angrily approached the children. Izuku. Hey you guys. He exclaimed, annoyed. However, when they were a few meters away from them, the 3 children disappeared in a black smoke, leaving the green-haired boy confused, but when he approached the boy, he would see something that would leave him surprised. The silhouette would change, now being a teenager with green hair and a black school uniform. Izuku, seeing this, was stupefied. Izuku, me? That was the only thing he mentioned. This was another Izuku who was wearing the uniform of the school he went to before entering UA, only this Izuku looked somewhat unstable. He looked up at Izuku, the other broccoli, upon looking at him, would throw himself at him with the intention of strangling him. However, before he could touch it, it was chained by several chains of different colors that came out of the ground, not allowing it to move. Little by little, its appearance changed, revealing its true identity. Izuku, I should have known it was you, Genocide. He said with a serious and cold tone of voice. Genocide, damn you. He screamed furiously, trying to jump towards him to kill him, but the chains prevented him. The green-haired man would simply turn around ready to leave that place, however when he was already a few meters away from Genocide, he shouted something that caught Izuku's attention. Genocide, damn bastard, this is not going to stay like this, Izuku, even if you don't accept it, I am part of you, I am your hate, and at some point you are going to need my power, and when that day comes you are going to pay dearly for it, you heard me, very dearly, ha 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 ha. He finished saying while laughing like a complete madman. Izuku would only ignore this as he continued walking, however he couldn't help but feel slightly worried about what his hatred said. Back to reality. Broccoli would wake up suddenly, alerting everyone that seeing him awake would make them happy. Before anyone could say a word, Izuku was attacked by his 3 girlfriends who hugged him, well they couldn't help but shed a few tears. Melissa, Izuku, sniff, we're glad you're awake, you came out very badly injured from that battle, you need to be more careful, idiot, do you have any idea how much it would have hurt us to know that you had died? Sniff, I don't want to lose the person who stole my heart. She said while shedding a couple of tears on the boy's chest. At that moment the green-haired boy felt like a complete idiot for making one of the most important people in his life cry, so he would hug Melissa while lovingly caressing her back, and the blonde rested her cheek on her partner's chest. Izuku, I'm so sorry Melissa, the last thing I want in life is to make you suffer, I hope that both you and the others can forgive me for being so stupid, please don't cry again, you look much more beautiful when you smile. He said while caressing her back gently and lovingly. The blonde couldn't help but blush, adorning her face, making her look very adorable from Izuku's perspective, while a certain light blue-haired girl and a pink-haired girl looked at the scene with some jealousy since they wanted to be in the light blue eyes place. They stayed like that for a few minutes until a fake cough from Epic made them separate, blushing a lot, but the blonde more so. Epic, well, we're glad you woke up, Hyper, but leaving aside your touching moment, now we have a serious problem with Taigo and your hatred. He said seriously. Izuku's expression became more serious and then he said. Izuku, I am aware of what is happening with my soul, but before continuing I must go to the bathroom. He said as he left. Some of his former classmates looked at the green-haired man with concern, while their counterparts looked at him also with concern, but also seriously. But Izuku. The freckled boy was in the sink wetting his face with cold water while he was breathing heavily. He would look up to see himself in the mirror, however, instead of seeing his reflection he saw Genocide, who had a psychopathic smile and his eyes glowing crimson red. Izuku would close his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, he noticed how his reflection returned to normal. He only saw his own face. "Izuku, this is so bad," he said while breathing heavily. Chapter 16. Fear and Insecurity. Night had fallen and people were returning to their homes to rest. The stars shone in the dark night sky as the icy cold air blew gently. At the UA Academy, several hours had passed since Izuku had faced his fallow and virus counterparts, being seriously injured, along with the discovery of a new threat, being the green-haired boy's own evil power. His own hatred, which he trusted so much, was now beginning to play against him. Right now we are in the UA dormitories, more precisely in the room of our young green-haired protagonist. He was sleeping like everyone else, however one could notice with the naked eye how he was sweating and moving from one side to the other in his bed. This is signs that he was having a nightmare. An Izuku's dream. We can find Izuku running in a huge void filled with darkness without even a single light. The green-haired man was nervous, acting as if he was looking for something or someone. From one moment to the next, the green-haired man stops, with a serious and angry expression on his face. "Stop playing with me, show yourself." Genocide, the boy shouted into the nothingness, his voice denoting that he was going towards his other side. Suddenly, a crazy laugh began to be heard throughout the place, which reverberated in that place causing an echo. You wouldn't have to be a genius to know who it was. From all that darkness came out a pair of large blood-red eyes that shone with fury in all that darkness, accompanied by a long row of extremely sharp teeth. "Oh come on, Izuku, don't be so boring. After all, the only thing I can do since you locked me up is torment you in your dreams. At least let me do that." The entity's voice was mocking and at the same time the contained hatred that it had for the green-haired man. The freckled man looked angrily at his counterpart. He was about to launch himself against him, ready to beat him up. However, he had barely taken the first step when he was surprised to find that the entire scene had changed. Where before there was a completely dark place with nothing, now there was a city completely in ruins, the flames slowly consuming the buildings. Apart from the fact that hundreds of thousands of corpses and blood along with the organs decorated the grim scene, Izuku opened his eyes wide as he witnessed this. For a second he felt his stomach turn and his nostrils filled with the smell of blood and bodies being burned and consumed by the flames. "Ooh, but what the hell is this, Genocide? What are you up to now?" I asked the air angrily. The boy did not receive any answer. He began to run aimlessly trying to find a survivor. As the boy walked through the destroyed streets of the city he found more and more completely torn apart bodies. The fact of seeing so much carnage only increased the boy's anger. What the hell was Genocide plan now? Was the question he kept asking himself. The boy continued running aimlessly until, without realizing it, he reached a building that he knew very well, the UA Academy. However, Izuku saw something in front of the building entrance that made him open his eyes in horror and, after a long time, fear. In front of the entrance were the disemboweled bodies of 3 people, more specifically 3 girls. The boy immediately recognized the bodies. Despite being completely disfigured and bathed in their own blood, it didn't take him a second to recognize them. They were the bodies of the women he loved the most. There were Melissa Shield, Najire Hato and Mei Hatsune. "And no, please, why you don't?" the boy repeated over and over again. Terror and desperation could be seen from miles away in the green-haired man's eyes. He approached the bodies, trembling slightly. Once in front of them, the boy fell to his knees while his hair covered his eyes. However, tears could be seen falling down his cheeks and ending up falling on the corpses. In the silence of that place, the weak sobs of the emerald-eyed man could be heard. Izuku crouched down and hugged the corpses in pain as more tears came out of his eyes, seeming to have no end. When he opened his eyes he could notice that when he saw his reflection he saw himself, but with his hate mode activated and covered in blood, well, he smiled like a complete psychopath. Suddenly, maniacal laughter was heard throughout the place. The freckled man already knew who they belonged to, but he ignored them, keeping his gaze down, while he continued to hug the corpses of the girls he loves. "Ha, you should see your face right now, it's priceless, ha." The dark entity laughed mockingly and psychopathically. Izuku listened to the words of his other half, but he didn't answer. He was silent. "This is what you have going for you, right? That at any moment you can't control me anymore and we end up massacring everyone, and the best part is that you can't kill me or get rid of me because I am part of you." The green-haired psychopath only let out huge laughs full of madness that resonated throughout the place, but suddenly the atmosphere became heavy. Genocide noticed this immediately. He quickly realized that the enormous pressure was caused by Izuku. The freckled man gently placed the corpses on the ground and then slowly stood up, still with his hair covering his eyes. Suddenly he looked up, showing a darkened face and eyes that reflected enormous fury. "You are a wretch," the freckled man shouted furiously. When the boy shouted, a huge pillar of magic surrounded him. At the same time the entire place began to shake and many powerful air currents destroyed everything. Genocide had to hold on to the ground to keep from flying away. He tried to move his arm, but realized he couldn't. When he turned around he realized that a green chain was holding him tightly, not letting him move his limb even an inch. In a matter of seconds, several chains of other colors emerged from the ground, beginning to hold the green-haired psychopath. Hehehe, you can't fool me Izuku, you're still scared, I can see it in your eyes, you're scared. The red-eyed man shouted mockingly and insanely. Izuku just frowned as he looked at his chained counterpart before letting out a scream of fury. Damn it, you think you're such a big deal, I'm going to show you true power. After the green-haired man's scream, the whole place was covered in a powerful white glow. The glow was such that even Genocide had to close his eyes. Real world. Izuku woke up from his dream breathing heavily. He realized that he was sweating a lot. The boy sat on his bed with his hands on his face. That dream, or interaction he had with Genocide in his subconscious, really had affected him. He looked up, revealing his eyes that reflected a mixture of fear and seriousness. Izuku would get out of bed leaving his room going directly to the living room where he would find his classmates, along with his other selves, although the latter did not speak to those from class 1A. The green-haired boy had his head down, and it was noticeable that he was releasing an enormous depressive aura. Those present quickly looked at this looking with concern at the freckled boy. Are you okay Izuku bro? Kirishima asked worriedly. The green-haired boy looked at Kirishima out of the corner of his eye with a dead look, causing the dyed Reed to shiver. Izuku upon seeing Kirishima remembered what he had told him the day of the incident. How could you do this to us Midoriya? Selling out your friends like this is not manly. I respected you, I considered you my friend. You have no idea how disappointed I am right now, the Reed shouted as tears of fury and sadness came out of his eyes. Izuku clenched his fists tightly as he remembered those words. He had to restrain himself greatly from hitting the boy. I am fine. Was all the freckled boy could say, still with his head down. Izuku would begin to walk towards the door, but would be interrupted again, this time by a certain four eyes. Midoriya, if you need to talk or something, you can tell us after all, we are friends. Lita had said in a vain attempt to help the boy who once saved her life. Izuku clenched his fist so tightly that they began to bleed, his eyes momentarily glowed scarlet red, and several veins appeared on his face due to the fury he felt at that moment. The boy just let out a very heavy sigh, managing to slightly calm his fury. He would take the doorknob ready to leave, but not before saying. I'm fine, I'm just going for a walk, and Lita we're not friends, we haven't been friends in a long time. He said in a cold voice. The blue-haired boy just lowered his head sadly upon hearing the boy's cold words. Izuku would simply leave the room under the sad gazes of everyone present including his other versions. He as he said would go out for a walk, he needed to clear his mind. Izuku began to walk calmly through the city. As he passed through the streets he could notice how all the people, be they men, women, children and the elderly, looked at him with deep fear and terror, as if at any moment he was going to tear them apart. Of course this did not help at all in the boy's spirits. The green-haired man went to get a coffee to see if that would help him relax even a little. Unfortunately this was useless. Izuku left the place to continue his walk. While walking through the streets the sky began to cloud over, and soon after it began to rain. He could hear some of the conversations that had him as the main topic. Isn't that the boy who slaughtered those villains? What are you doing here? That brat should be in prison. He is nothing more than a monster and a murderer. I bet he'll go crazy any minute like that and kill us all. In normal summons this would not affect Izuku at all, since he had been a mercenary for a time, however this was a very different case. Every time Izuku felt more and more lost, he felt like the drops of rain fell on him, wetting his skin and clothes, but this mattered little or nothing to him. He was too immersed in his thoughts to give importance to the water. The boy continued walking without a fixed direction. It was not until he reached a television store that his lens and heart fell to pieces. On one of the television screens, a newlywed couple could be seen smiling happily at the camera. Seeing that image, Izuku's entire future was reflected. What would become of his future? Maybe he didn't even have one. What truly scared Izuku was not knowing the way. He knew that when this business with the evil Isaac ended, his friends would leave, and maybe he would never see them again, or worse, that Genocide would achieve his goal of taking over his body, and if that happened, he would lose the few people he still cares about. Without friends and without family, he would be alone again. The boy could see his reflection in the glass of the store. Nearby a lightning bolt would fall illuminating the place. His reflection would be replaced by the image of a smiling Genocide. Another lightning bolt would fall, illuminating the area again and showing Izuku's normal appearance again. The green-haired boy, after a long walk through the city, would return to the UA departments with his thoughts still running through his head, apart from a great sadness. Chapter 17. We support you. After Izuku walked for a couple of hours he returned to the UA apartments with great sadness. Upon entering he ignored his classmates and went directly to his room, leaving those present with great concern. Midoriya's emotional state is getting worse and worse, we can't let him continue like this. Momo said in a worried manner. At that a certain blue-haired man with glasses would stand up. I'll go talk to him, Midoriya is my friend, before I wasn't there to support him, but this time I will. However, before Lita could take a step, she was stopped by a certain white-haired man with heterochromatic eyes, who gave her a serious yet cold look. You won't do anything, the only thing you'd help would be to make his current condition worse. Cross exclaimed sharply. At what the albino said, the young aspiring heroes could not contain their anger. You don't get involved, you don't know how bad we've been feeling since we found out about our mistake, both me and my friends feel terrible for having turned our backs on him and not trusting him, now we're trying to fix our mistake, but you guys are standing in our way, just leave us alone, it's your fault that we can't make Midoriya forgive us. Lita exclaimed angrily. The Four Eyes was already out of his mind, guilt was eating him up every damn day of his life since the incident, all he wanted was to get his friend's forgiveness, so that things would be like before, however since those copies of Izuku appeared, he hadn't even been able to get close to him, and now one of them was telling him that they couldn't go comfort him when he needed it. It was simply the last straw. From one second to the next, a great pressure began to be felt in the environment, at the same time as a great killer instinct. Before this those of Class 1 froze with fear, at the same time that it began to become difficult for them to breathe, these by instinct fixed their sight on Cross, who gave them a look so cold that it could freeze hell. You better shut up once and for all you damn imbecile, neither you nor they have the right to say anything, you have no idea what it feels like to have your loved ones, whom you appreciate more than anything and even consider family, turn their backs on you to the point of betraying you, that added to the fact that you practically have a crazy genocidal maniac inside you thirsty for blood. You only cause more pain to Hyper, if you really appreciate him even a little, it's better that you leave him alone. The albino finished saying, turning his back on him and then heading to the freckled man's room. The entire class managed to compose themselves once Cross left, standing up very furious at the words said by the other version of Izuku, all this under the serious and pitying looks of the other albinos. With Cross. The albino was in front of his counterpart's room, he would be lying if he said he wasn't a little nervous, but he knew that his friend was the one who needed more support than ever at this moment. Cross with a determined look knocks on the door waiting for the boy on the other side to let him in. After the boy knocked on the door, a few seconds passed before it opened, revealing an Izuku with a sad and depressed face. Cross, what can I help you with? The freckled man asked in a sad tone. Let's stop playing hyper games, we have to talk very seriously about your current state, you've been with that enormous aura of sadness all day, just tell me what's wrong Izuku, we're trying to help you. Every word that came out of Cross's mouth was full of compassion, just as his face expressed sadness. The green-haired man had his gaze down, his eyes covered by his hair, a deathly silence filled the place, the albino could see how some tears fell down the freckled man's cheeks. Cross. The aforementioned saw how Izuku raised his head showing his eyes, from which tears were falling. I'm afraid that I won't be able to protect them, that genocide will take over my body and hurt you and them, even if I defeat genocide, I'm not sure that they won't get hurt against the evil Izuku's Cross, I already lost a lot when they betrayed me, I don't want to lose anyone else. Every word Izuku said was filled with sadness, worry, and fear. The mixed-eyed man looked at this in surprise, in all he knew the emerald-eyed man he had never seen him so vulnerable. Hyper, calm down please. I try to reassure him by putting my right hand on his shoulder. However, this proved to be of no use. I can't calm down Cross, not when I have a genocidal psychopath inside me trying to gain control of my body. He said, raising his voice as he began to despair, taking his head with one of his hands. Cross's gaze turned grim, as if he had remembered something that greatly displeased him. I know how you feel. Hey, what do you mean Cross? Izuku asked, surprised. The white-haired man let out a deep sigh, he knew he had to tell her about his past sooner or later, after all they were quite similar. You better get going, this is going to be a long one. Izuku was in total shock when he heard what Cross had to suffer through, he had been through something very similar, if not the same as him. Cross. The albino looked with his typical serious expression at his friend and counterpart. Hyper, I know how you feel, the pain and disappointment of having the people you love the most turn their backs on you and even go so far as to try to kill you. I also understand that feeling of fear at believing that at any moment that guy can take over your body. I've been in the same place as you, so don't you dare say something stupid like nobody understands me, because I understand you perfectly. The green-haired man was silent for a few seconds before asking a question. Cross, what happened next? The aforementioned only limited himself to sighing. After I met Ink and he told me that he couldn't revive the dead with his brush, I became depressed for a while at the same time that I began to despair and get angry. I was practically a disaster until one day, he appeared. Cross said, stopping when he remembered that guy. Who is he? Izuku asked, not having a good feeling. The albino looked at him for a few seconds with a gloomy look before answering the question. Nightmare. Izuku was a being of pure and despicable evil. When I realized his presence, I tried to remain calm, but deep down I knew that this guy was extremely dangerous. My instincts were screaming at me not to trust him. The albino explained seriously. And what happened next? He told me that he had felt my negative emotions, my sadness, my anger, my pain, my loneliness, thanks to that he managed to reach my universe. Once there he offered me a deal. Cross had paused after saying those words. The deal was that he would help me rebuild my universe, he would send me to different universes to collect their base code and in this way be able to rebuild X-Tail, but I rejected his deal. He explained with a serious face and with some sadness as he remembered the accident in his universe. The green-haired man remained serious without taking his gaze off Cross. Why didn't you accept his deal? I bet you would have loved to have your universe back. Izuku asked. This question had no hidden intention or distrust, he simply wanted to know why. The albino looked at him for a few seconds before sighing heavily. He wanted something in return, he wanted me to hurt someone for every universe I visited, but not physically. I think you know what I mean, the mixed-eyed man explained. I wanted them to hurt me to excite me. Izuku quickly deduced. Yes, emotional damage can be worse than physical damage, I think you know that perfectly well. He said seriously, but I also wanted this to be able to absorb negative feelings and thus increase his power. I refused his deal because I know the kind of people like Nightmare. Just looking into his eyes made me nauseous, he literally emanated evil throughout his body. I knew he would only use me for his convenience, and once he no longer needed me he would kill me without hesitation. Apart from that, I didn't want anyone else to have to suffer because of my own selfish whim. Cross finished saying with a sad face. Izuku looked at Cross with surprise and sadness, he had undoubtedly been through a lot. But well, I'm getting off topic. What I want to say, Hyper, is that you are not alone, both me and the others are supporting you, and we will help you fight this, and once this genocide issue is resolved, we will defeat the evil Izukus. You will have your happy ending. Hearing Cross's words, the green-haired man felt his cheeks grow wet. Without realizing it, he had let out a few small tears of happiness. At the same time, a smile appeared on his face, a smile he had not shown since his betrayal, a smile that reflected his hope. Cross, thank you. Time skip. A couple of days had passed since the conversation that Cross had with the freckled boy. Since then Izuku's mood had improved considerably. Now, although he was still just as cold and distant with his ex-friends, he was no longer affected as much by Genocide's attempts to control him, as well as the nightmares had almost completely disappeared. Currently we can see our green protagonist in the support workshop. He was spending time with his girlfriend May, and by spending time, he meant helping her with her inventions, which even after so much time were still exploding. Right now the green-haired man was helping the girl in what appeared to be a large humanoid robot. Izuku, can you pass me the wrench, please? May asked, still making adjustments to her new baby. Sure, May. Izuku said. He looked at the toolbox for a few seconds and then picked one at random, hoping it was the right one. Izuku, that's not it, that's a wrench. The freckled boy rummaged through the box again, taking out another of the many tools. That's a pneumatic wrench. Izuku gave a defeated sigh. I'm not made for mechanics, haha, it was better when I helped you test your babies, and they ended up exploding, haha. The boy laughed in a somewhat melancholic way when remembering how his friendship with the lover of inventions began. Hey, that's not true, my babies didn't always fail. The pink-haired girl protested. Her boyfriend gave her you don't even believe it look, causing her to let out a small sigh. Okay, I admit there may have been some mistakes, he tried to defend himself. Some? The boy asked somewhat mockingly. At this May was already starting to get angry. Okay, let's drop this and get on with my new baby. The pink-haired girl exclaimed, trying to change the subject. Izuku could only let out a small laugh at his girlfriend's reaction. She was slightly surprised by this. What are you laughing at? I asked, confused, still frowning. The freckled man looked at her for a few seconds before answering with a smile. You look cute, angry. Chapter 18. Izuku and May. May, a pink-haired girl with a great passion for inventions, which she calls babies. Something that stands out about her are her very peculiar eyes, which look like the sights of a telescope. This is due to her quirk that allows her to see long distances. She had managed to enter the UA Academy, the largest hero school in all of Japan. One would think that she wanted to study to be a hero, but that is totally wrong. Mei did not enter UA to be a hero, nor did she even enter the hero course. She entered the support workshop where her students worked designing and manufacturing with their own hands all kinds of technological artifacts that help the heroes in their missions, from suits tailored to their quirks to high-tech weapons. The girl felt very happy because by entering the UA she would learn to improve her babies. She hoped that her inventions would be useful to others, that they would tell her that she really helped. It's a shame it didn't happen that way. Of Mei. Since I entered the UA, more specifically the support workshop, I was very excited and happy. I know perfectly well that my quirk would not be of much use to be a hero. I was never interested in that option anyway. I dedicated myself to creating my babies. I wanted to improve the hero suits to artifacts that would help them with their quirk. I always made them with great passion, hoping that when someone uses them they will work. Just thinking that my babies could be useful to someone filled me with joy. Sometimes I even thought that these could save someone's life. However, I wasn't so lucky. Unfortunately, every time I finished one of my babies, they would explode as soon as I turned them on. There were even cheers in which they would explode while I was still making adjustments. It was very annoying that all my work would go down the drain in a second. There were cheers in which I would really get angry to the point of despair, but I never showed it. I always stayed positive, and I guess my passion for my babies didn't let me give up. I just don't want to be a hindrance. I want to be a great inventor to help, even if it's indirectly. The sports festival was my chance to make my babies stand out, and added to the fact that we were being watched by representatives of large companies. If I could impress them with my babies, it could be my big chance at total failure. None of them were interested in my babies and honesty. That was a hard blow to my pride as an inventor, but I was not going to give up so easily. Shortly after that, Izuku Midoriya came to me asking for help with his hero costume. I obviously accepted with great enthusiasm, and so I did. I made modifications to his hero costume, and apparently they were useful, and he liked them because several times he came back to the workshop to ask me for help again, either modifying his costume or some other artifact like gloves or boots. Honestly, those moments in which he came to me to help him made me very happy. I felt as if I was finally helping someone. After that, he kept coming to ask me for help with his hero suit, and I also asked him to help me test my babies. Of course, they always blew up in his face. I didn't know why then, but every time I saw him walk through that door with that sweet smile I felt very happy, although it almost always exploded in his face, and I ended up on top of him, but the details don't matter. At first I thought that this happiness was due to the fact that for the first time someone appreciated my work, and not only that but supported me, something that no one had done before. Then Mei. Flashback, a few weeks before Izuku's betrayal. The pink-haired girl was seen gathering her things ready to go home. Classes had already ended and she was ready to leave. Once she left the workshop she met a certain green-haired man in the hallway. "Midoriya?" Mei asked, approaching the boy. "Oh, Hatsune-san, I was just looking for you," the boy said, somewhat nervous and blushing, as was usual every time he talked to a girl. The girl was clearly confused by what the freckled man said. "And why were you looking for me?" "Oh well, I just wanted to thank you for always helping me with my hero suit and your other gadgets." "They're my babies," she corrected him. "Oh sure," he said with a drop of an anime-style sweat. "Well, thanks anyway, your babies were very useful to me," the boy said with a happy smile. Mei was stunned at that moment by the boy's words. No one had ever thanked him for his babies, since they always ended up exploding, so hearing those words from the green-haired boy made her heart start to beat with happiness. A small smile appeared on her lips. "I'm glad I could help you, Midoriya." Mei smiled at the boy. She was certainly very happy at that moment. Izuku blushed a little and took something out of his pocket. This slightly caught the pinkette's attention. "By the way, I also wanted to give you this. It's a gift. I made it myself. It's a token of thanks for your help, Hatsune-san." The boy, with a big blush and noticeable nerves, took out of his pocket a small metal heart with a golden key. The girl was surprised by this, and at the same time, without her realizing it, a slight blush appeared on her beautiful face. "I know it's not much, besides, see, compared to what you do, it's not a big deal." I stuttered with a big blush and nervousness. However, what Izuku did not expect was that the girl would take his heart in her hands. When he looked into her eyes, he could see how they had a happy glow, apart from the fact that she was a little blushed and showed a big smile that only reflected happiness. "Midoriya, thank you very much." Mei's voice only reflected happiness at that moment. She felt her heart begin to beat very fast. At the same time, a couple of tears came out of her eyes and fell down her cheeks. The freckled man, seeing how the inventor began to cry, became quite alarmed, believing that he had said something that hurt her. Before Izuku said anything, he felt arms surround him. He watched in amazement as the pink-haired inventor hugged him without ever erasing her smile. "Really, thanks for supporting me, Midoriya," Mei said happily. The boy could only reciprocate the hug, not very often in response to her actions, but for some reason, being hugged by that imperative and energetic girl, he felt happy. After a few seconds they both separated. Mei wiped her tears while Izuku was blushing a lot. "Well, I have to go home, I'm glad to talk to you Midoriya." The girl began to walk towards the exit, but she stopped halfway. This slightly caught the green-haired man's attention. Surprisingly, Mei turned around and in a quick movement gave Izuku a light kiss on the cheek. If before he was blushing, now his face looked like a ripe tomato. Seeing him like that, Mei couldn't help but think that he looked tender. Without further ado, she left with some embarrassment, but for some reason, she didn't regret what she did. Her heart was beating 1,000 times a second at the same time that a slight reddish tone adorned her cheeks. She never had someone to support her, but Izuku was there for her, encouraging her. He believed in her when no one else did, and that made her very happy, although she didn't know at that moment what she was truly beginning to feel for the green-haired boy. End of flashback. Present. Back to the present, classes had already ended and both teenagers were getting ready to leave. However, before the green-haired boy left the workshop, his beloved girlfriend stopped him. "Wait Izuku, I want to give you something." Mei's voice sounded somewhat nervous. Apart from the fact that her face was adorned with a slight blush, she took a small golden heart necklace out of a drawer and extended her hand towards Izuku, who looked at the beautiful necklace with surprise. The boy gently held the necklace, looking at it with surprise and happiness, then looked at the inventor. "Do you like it?" I asked a little nervously. "I don't like it, I love it." The words spoken by the freckled man were loaded with great love and affection towards the girl in front of him. He approached her, covering her in a soft and loving hug, which was reciprocated by the pink-haired girl. When they separated from the hug, they both looked at each other with love. Mei, seeing the boy's emerald eyes, could only see the great love he felt for her, and the same thing happened with Izuku, who was mesmerized by his girlfriend's beautiful and unusual eyes. Now everyone has their own necklace. Mei laughed, showing that she had the same heart that Izuku had given her a long time ago, only she wore it as a necklace. The boy was surprised to see the gift that he himself had made with his own hands and had given to the girl. A nostalgic smile appeared on Izuku's face as he kept his eyes on the metal heart his girlfriend had. "I'm surprised you still have it," he said, scratching the back of his neck somewhat nervously. "Of course I have it, it's your gift after all." Izuku could only blush slightly as he saw Mei's beautiful smile, that smile that he loved so much and tried so hard to protect. Mei felt a surge of nostalgia as she watched her boyfriend blush. It reminded her of how he was before the big incident of his betrayal. Despite his noticeable change in attitude, her feelings hadn't changed at all. She still loved him like the first day she discovered her true feelings for the green-haired boy while she saw his blush. She saw how at least a little of the old Izuku was still alive, and that made her very happy. Knowing that that sweet, tender and kind side of the boy was still alive filled her with joy and happiness. "By the way, the necklace I gave you has a little secret," Mei said. She pressed a small button on the side of the collar, causing it to show the hollow interior. "This little hole will allow you to save a photo. You can choose the photo you want," he said with a smile. "Understood, thank you very much for this beautiful gift, Mei," Izuku said happily. He took the necklace and put it on, seeing that it fit him perfectly. They both left the workshop holding hands while talking calmly and happily. Everyone else had already left, leaving them both as the last to leave. The sunlight streamed through the windows. This, combined with the silence, produced a serene and peaceful atmosphere. It was undoubtedly very beautiful. It seemed like a scene from some romantic movie. At that, the green-haired boy would look sideways at his reflection in one of the windows, and to his surprise, instead of finding the dark image of genocide, what he saw was himself, his old self, before the betrayal, walking happily with Mei, while their hands smiled with happiness for being with each other. A nostalgic smile was marked on the boy's lips as he continued walking, holding his partner's hand. "He is not dead yet." It was the last thing on Izuku's mind as he turned all his attention to his beloved inventor as they walked through the UA hallways toward the exit. Chapter 19. The darkness grows. Izuku was currently talking quietly with Delta about trivial things. "So you can also travel between AUs, right Delta?" Izuku asked, looking at his counterpart. "Exactly, my friend." "Wow, that must be amazing, traveling between different universes as you please, seeing different kinds of places, meeting new versions of yourself or us," the green-haired man commented, fascinated by his friend's ability and the possibilities. The white-haired boy with orange eyes scratched the back of his neck, letting out a small laugh. "Haha, you're partly right, traveling between AUs is amazing, but..." Suddenly the boy's tone of voice changed to a serious and sad one as he looked at his hand. "I got this power after losing everything. I lost my universe and my family." Delta's gaze reflected sadness. Izuku instantly realized this. "Hey, I'm sorry Delta, I shouldn't have asked," the green-haired man said sadly. "It's okay Hyper, you didn't know." The orange-eyed man said with a calm smile, but now let's talk about another topic. How have you been with your soul of hate, Hyper? A serious expression appeared on the boy's face. The moment Delta finished speaking, the atmosphere fell into a great and uncomfortable silence. The white-haired man just stared seriously at Hyper, who had his gaze downcast with his darkened gaze. I have it under control. That clearly wasn't the truth and Delta knew it. Hyper, tell me the truth. Izuku just clenched his fists tightly. I'm still the same, my problem hasn't improved at all, but it hasn't gotten worse either. I still have those horrible nightmares, and I still hear Genocide's voice from time to time. Honestly, at this point I don't know what to do. The boy's voice reflected frustration and sadness. He felt frustrated and guilty at the same time that now they not only had to worry about the bad guys, but also Genocide. Delta looked sadly at his friend. He could see how his eyes slowly began to grow in desperation. At the same time his fear and insecurity could be seen. Hyper, emotions can help you, but don't let them cloud your judgment. This is what happens with your hatred, because your magic has evolved and is rebelling against you. You know, with great power it comes. I know, a great responsibility. Izuku interrupted his other self. I was going to say big consequences, but that's also true, Hyper. I know we'll find a way to help you. If you see that you can't control your hatred anymore, just let us know and we'll help you. A kind smile appeared on the white-haired man's face. Izuku could only smile, but not in mockery. He really smiled. Thank you, Delta. What are friends for? Well, it would be better if we went to class. Honestly, I'd rather avoid Izawa's lecture. Delta said as he started walking to the classroom. The green-haired boy just walked calmly to his living room. Ahahaha, soon my friend, soon hahaha. Izuku froze for a second upon hearing the macabre voice and laughter of his alter ego. A drop of sweat slid down his neck at the same time, as a strong chill ran down his spine. The freckled boy shook his head trying to calm down. Once in the classroom, Izuku along with his other versions, listened with boredom to what the black-haired boy with the appearance of a vagabond said. Alright kids, today we'll have combat training, so put on your hero suits and go to the Gamma training camp. I think that's what it was called. The black-haired boy said as he got into his sleeping bag and rolled out of the living room. Already at the training camp everyone was in their hero costumes waiting for Izawa's instructions. Well, listen up. As I said, today we'll have combat training to see how much you've improved. The battles will be 2 against 2, and the teams will be chosen randomly. Explained the hero who seems to be addicted to some kind of drug. Once the teams were chosen, Izawa said who were going to face each other. The result was Team 3. Bakugo Katsuki and Todoroki Shoto. Yes. Team 5. Izuku and Delta Izuku. Hearing this, those present couldn't help but worry about the outcome of the battle. This even worried Izawa and the rest of the Izukus, however not everyone thought the same. Haha, that's great, I'll have the chance to humiliate that bucking nerd and his stupid copy. Today must be my lucky day. The Muslim said with a cocky smile. The green-haired man looked angrily at the one he once considered his friend. He was about to respond when a hand rested on his shoulder. He saw that it was Delta who was looking at him smiling. Calm down, Hyper, we'll finish this quickly. Izuku let out a sigh, managing to calm down. He knew perfectly well that he had to control himself. Both teams entered the battlefield, which was a small town, and began preparing for combat. Listen you damn half-half, don't get involved, I'll finish both Dekus in a second myself, the ashen-haired man shouted in Shoto's face, who looked at him neutrally. That's a terrible idea, Bakugo. We both know perfectly well that both of them are incredibly strong, we can't just throw them head-on. Said the bicolor trying to reason with his teammate. Nobody asked for your damn half-and-half opinion. Shoto sighed knowing that no matter what he said, his stupid partner wouldn't listen to him. While these two were talking, both Izukus were preparing for combat. Hyper, I just ask you to keep your anger and hatred under control. If at any time you feel like you're starting to get out of control, clear your mind, maybe that way you'll be able to keep your soul of hatred from getting out of control. The orange-eyed man advised the freckled boy. The boy was doing some basic stretches while listening to his friend and partner. Understood, Delta. Was the green-haired man's affirmative response. Start. As always shouted from the observation room, swearing to the other students, giving their all to the fight. As soon as Bakugo heard those words he launched himself at full speed against Izuku, using his explosions to propel himself. The green-haired man saw this and by reflex, tried to activate his hate mode to quickly end the battle. However, when he tried to do this, he felt a strong stabbing pain in his head. But why can't I use my hate mode? Unless, Genocide, what did you do to my hate mode? The green-haired man asked his alter ego angrily. Hahaha, you already realized, my little surprise friend. Hahaha, you forgot that I am the representation of your hatred. In simpler terms, I am your soul of hatred. Basically, I will not let you use my power anymore, and this is the best part. Not only did you lose your hatred mode, but you will not be able to use your seraphim mode either. Or did you forget that I need your 8 traits to access that form? Including the soul of hatred. Have fun, hahaha. The psychopathic laughter of Izuku's evil alter ego echoed in his head like a damn drum, but what shocked the boy was what his dark inner tenant said. He had lost a large amount of his power from one second to the next, all the power that he had worked so hard to control. He had lost a lot of that power because of genocide. That made him too angry. However, his line of thought was cut off when he received a large explosion in the face that sent him back several meters, separating himself from Delta in the process. Deku. You didn't have to be a genius to know who it was. Izuku sighed, annoyed. He summoned a shield of green magic, managing to protect himself from a powerful explosion sent by the ashen-haired man. But something the boy noticed was how a very tiny crack had appeared on his shield. Izuku would have widened his eyes at this. How was it still possible? He had faced the entire top 10 heroes of Japan, and his shields hadn't received a scratch, but now they were cracking because of this stupid explosion addict. Without a doubt, his magic was in a worse state than he thought. Izuku summoned his blaster cannon in his left hand and pointed it at the boy in front of him, who never stopped and continued to launch explosions like crazy, a powerful beam of magic, sending Bakugo flying against one of the buildings. "TCH, today is not my day," said the green-haired man while in one hand he had his blaster cannon and in the other a red magic sword. While this was happening, Delta was dodging several of Todoroki's ice spikes. "So how's everything going?" the white-haired boy asked vaguely. "Are you seriously asking me that in the middle of a battle?" Todoroki asked, throwing a large pillar of ice towards the Izuku from another universe. The orange-eyed man simply summoned a pair of blasters and used them alone as shields, then Delta teleported a few meters behind Todoroki. "You know, I must admit that you are good with long-distance attacks, but you should improve your hand-to-hand combat," he said, drawing the bicolor's attention. Shoto turned around, preparing an attack with one hand. That fire, Delta would try to dodge it, but he would notice how he couldn't move his feet. He looked down, seeing how ice covered his feet. "Smart boy," the orange-eyed man said simply. He put his arms in an X to cover himself when the bicolor threw a large flame at him. Todoroki knew how strong this guy could be, so he wasn't going to hold back, and he wasn't going to give him the chance to defend himself. However, this would be of little or no use to the boy. Delta used his teleportation, appearing in front of his opponent. Before Todoroki could react, he ended up receiving a powerful blow to the middle of the stomach that knocked almost all the air out of him and sent him rolling several meters on the ground. He stopped his walk with a wall of ice while he got up with great difficulty, looking at the orange-eyed man. At the same time trying to catch his breath that he had lost after receiving that blow. Shoto looked with his typical cold gaze into Delta's orange eyes, which shone with bravery. "Come on, Shoto, I know you can put up more of a fight," the white-haired man said in a battle pose. The bicolor activated both sides as he looked at his opponent. Many ice stakes were launched at full speed against Delta, who in turn summoned many bones which easily destroyed the ice spears. However, this tube had to move aside when many more stakes came out of the ground, most specifically right where he was standing. "I noticed you copied my style," the white-haired man commented with a defiant smile. Todoroki didn't say anything, instead he continued attacking. This time he began to use his fire side to throw large flames. Delta easily dodged the two colored tanks, however he noticed that due to the fire he had less and less space to move. Using his teleportation he appeared in front of Shoto, ready to hit him. Before Delta's fist managed to hit the mixed-eyed man's body, he managed to create an ice shield to protect himself in time. The white-haired man couldn't react when out of nowhere a gigantic ice pillar appeared under his feet, dragging him upwards. "Let this serve as a lesson to you not to be overconfident," Delta told the viewer, breaking the fourth wall. "Author, damn, now I have to fix that V." While this was happening, we focused again on Izuku's battle against Katsuki. The crazy ashen-haired man launched many explosions, trying to somehow do some damage to his opponent, which was useless since the green-haired man managed to block all of the boy's attacks with a green magic shield. "Damn bucking Deku, stay still," Bakugo shouted furiously as he continued to launch explosion after explosion. Izuku didn't say anything, instead he grabbed Bakugo by his left arm to throw him over his shoulder and throw him with great force against the ground, causing the ashen-haired man to spit saliva from the impact. This brings back memories, doesn't it for you?" the green-haired man asked nonchalantly. The memory of his first confrontation against Bakugo when they managed to enter the UA passed through Izuku's mind. Itsuki instantly stood up, using his explosions to get in front of the freckled boy. He put one of his hands in front of the boy's face, ready to unleash a powerful explosion. Before Bakugo could even touch Izuku, he pulled his arm away and then kicked him. Something worth noting was that Izuku's fists were covered in orange magic, while his feet had blue magic. Izuku made a great leap, seeing Bakugo from above. He came down at great speed, trying to kick the ashen-haired boy, who managed to dodge the attack by a hair, although because of this the freckled boy hit the ground, leaving a small crater. The boy got up without any damage, taking a large piece of rubble and throwing it with force against the explosion madman. Before the rubble hit him, he used his hands, launching a powerful explosion, destroying the rubble, although while it was being destroyed, Izuku appeared, giving Bakugo a powerful blow to the stomach, sending him crashing into a house. You made my life impossible, you always treated me worse than garbage, but I will never let you or anyone tramp on me again. The green-haired boy shouted furiously, launching himself to attack the ashen-haired boy. Bakugo tried to attack him with an explosion, but Izuku easily dodged it. The boy hit his former friend in the face, breaking his nose and causing him to spit out a couple of teeth. Before he could react, he received a powerful kick that ended up fracturing a couple of ribs. He did not fly away because Izuku grabbed him by the arm to slam him against the ground, causing the Muslim to be buried in a small crater. Come on, get up, this isn't over yet. Izuku shouted, glaring at the one he once considered a friend. Bakugo barely stood up as he glared at the freckled boy. He raised both hands, launching a gigantic explosion with all his might, which Izuku didn't even bother to dodge. The blonde smiled arrogantly at this. "Ahahaha, in the end you just turned out to be a great useless, as always, damn Deku." He shouted with mockery and arrogance, while an expression similar to madness was marked on his face. However, this happiness did not last long. When the smoke from the explosion cleared, Izuku could be seen looking at him coldly, although something that seemed strange to him was a strange yellow bar in front of the emerald eye. Izuku LV20. HP 1550-1650. Not bad, now I'll show you a real explosion. As soon as he finished saying that, several white dots surrounded a frightened Bakugo, who instantly recognized those dots. He didn't have time to react when those dots turned orange, exploding instantly. The explosions from these points were much more powerful than his own, which left him with several first and second degree burns. Izuku was not satisfied with this. He took out many light blue threads from his fingers, took Itsuki with him, and began to run at full speed, dragging the blonde's body in the process, which crashed into buildings and all kinds of obstacles, leaving him with several bruises on his body. They were like this for a few minutes until Izuku got bored and ended up throwing Bakugo against a wall. The green-haired man would swear he heard the blonde's bones break from the impact, but honestly he couldn't care less about this. While this was happening, those in the surveillance room watched this with concern that Izuku would accidentally end up killing Bakugo on the side of the freckled boy's former friends, and concern that the green-haired man could lose control on the part of the other Izukus. Back to the massacre, I say, battle. The freckled boy watched with contained fury as the ashen-haired boy stood up with great difficulty, barely able to stay standing. He looked up, seeing Izuku with pure hatred. "You will always be beneath me." It was the barely audible whisper that came out of the ashen-haired man's mouth. Those simple words were enough for the green-haired boy in a burst of speed to appear in front of him, grabbing him by the face and ending up slamming him against the same wall. He began to hit the boy's head against the wall, repeatedly causing the wall to slowly become stained with the explosive madman's blood. This worried the spectators too much. Izawa was about to stop the fight when he saw in horror how Izuku left a barely conscious Bakugo on the ground. The green-haired boy summoned his blaster cannon and pointed it at the ashen-haired boy's head, ready to shoot him, while his eyes had a slight reddish glow. "Midoriya, stop!" a horrified Izawa shouted through the speaker. The only response he received was the sound of Izuku's blaster cannon firing. The entire room fell into a deathly silence. While on the battlefield, Katsuki looked scared at the small crater next to his head, caused by the shot from Izuku's blaster cannon. The freckled man breathed deeply as he glared angrily at his former rival. Hyper let out a growl of frustration and went. He was frustrated and angry, but with himself, since he took a great risk, he could lose control. Without saying a word, he began to walk away from the blonde at a slow pace. Bakugo looked at this with anger as he barely got up. "Where the buck are you going, you stupid nerd? Come back here and finish the fight." Katsuki shouted angrily. "I'm done, you're not worth it, Bakugo, you never were," he said coldly without even looking at the ashy blonde. Bakugo went into a small shock upon hearing those words, only for an immense murderous rage to take over him. He pointed his gloves at the green-haired boy who was moving away from him. Without shame or hesitation, he pulled both triggers, generating an explosion of enormous proportions which destroyed everything in its path. Izuku barely turned around when he ran into the explosion heading towards him. The next thing that was seen was how the gigantic explosion hit the green-haired man's body while creating a path of destruction in its wake. Everyone in the room looked at this terrified for the well-being of their partner and friend, although the Izukus had a very bad feeling. The Kugo, as he watched the great destruction his attack had caused, slowly began to laugh, the laughter quickly turned into loud laughter. Haha. What he didn't know is that those words would cost him dearly. Instantly, a gigantic pressure was felt throughout the battlefield, accompanied by an enormous murderous instinct that screamed death. This visibly terrified the ashen-haired man, who felt his body tremble slightly as he felt that dark presence full of hatred. As the smoke cleared, Kitsuki could see a dark silhouette with blood-red eyes, which looked at him like a predator about to tear its prey apart. From one second to the next, the only thing the ashen-haired man could feel was an agonizing pain in his stomach. He looked down to see for just a second those red eyes that looked like they could shine in the dark. After that, the only thing that was seen was the ashen-haired man's body shooting out like a missile at maximum speed, to the point that he ended up going through more than 5 buildings, remaining on the ground in agony of pain. It was practically a miracle that he was still alive. Finally, Izuku could be seen, but he had a very noticeable change in his appearance. The left half of his face was almost disfigured, having his left eye black with a red pupil crying large amounts of black liquid. The same thing happened with that side of his mouth, which was practically a half smile full of madness. The other side of his face was the complete opposite. His right side expression showed fear and despair, something that was now difficult to see in Izuku. This one was holding his head very tightly while letting out grunts of pain, but not normal grunts, they sounded like the grunts of a beast, or rather, of a demon. "Oh, leave me alone, damn it," the boy said with difficulty while holding his head in great pain. Due to the immense pain, he fell to his knees while little by little the left half of his body began to be covered by hatred. At that moment Delta appeared with his teleportation when he felt a great dark presence appear, and that presence came from Hyper's body. Izuku, seeing how the white-haired man appeared next to him, looked at him with difficulty. "Delta calls Inc." the green-haired boy said with difficulty. "Come on, Hyper, we'll help you, just hold on, please," he said with great concern, helping Izuku get up. Both boys disappeared from the place thanks to Delta's teleportation. Both appeared in the UA dormitories, where a few seconds later the rest of the Izukus appeared. "Epic, quickly call Inc. Tell him it's an emergency, we need his help as soon as possible," the orange-eyed man shouted with utmost seriousness and concern. The aforementioned gave a nod, opening a portal to search for the protector of the AUs. When Epic left, the other Izukus looked with concern, as their friend was holding his head in great pain at the same time that half of his body was slowly being surrounded by the substance of hate. "I hope Inc. arrives soon," Delta said, looking sadly and worriedly at the green-haired boy. Chapter 20. Inner Demons. A couple of minutes passed since Epic went through the portal to look for the guardian of the AUs. In the middle of the room, a portal opened again, from which the purple-eyed man and the painter came out. As soon as they appeared, all the Izukus set their sights on the newcomers. "Tell me quickly where Hyper is," Inc. demanded to know with concern. Instantly Cross summarized the recent events about the problem with Izuku's hatred and his instability. Inc's fall at that moment reflected total surprise and concern. "Alright, Epic, you and Cross will come with me and Hyper. I know what I had to do, but it would be best to go to a secluded place, so as not to run any risks," the painter explained seriously while looking at those mentioned. "There's a forest on the outskirts of the city, it's to the north," the green-haired man said with difficulty, his voice distorted. "It will do, well Cross, you take Hyper, we must go as soon as possible, the rest will stay here at the UA, in case the bad guys attack them," said the white-haired painter, receiving a nod from the other Izukus. Inc., Epic, Cross and Hyper would disappear from the place thanks to their teleportation. They would reappear in a large forest with no signs of humans. "I don't feel the presence of any humans, we can work in peace," Epic said seriously. Cross would put Izuku on the ground while the purple-eyed man sat in front of him. "Listen carefully, Hyper. Now I'm going to try to stabilize your magic. While I do this, you must enter into your soul and solve this problem with your hatred," the albino explained seriously. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Let me be more clear, you must stop this childish hatred you have for those kids once and for all," he said even more seriously and sharply. Izuku opened his eyes wide at this. He was about to say something, but a sharp pain in his head stopped him. "That's what I mean, listen, I already know the soul of hatred. The users of this soul are corrupted by their own hatred, reaching cases where their personality is altered and changed to a darker, sadistic and cruel one. That's what's happening to you. Oh, I must remind you of how you were before your betrayal." Epic's words left Izuku silent. It's true, he couldn't even deny the fact that he had changed too much since that moment. He came out of his thoughts when his counterpart continued speaking. Hate is something common in hyper people. Every conscious being has at least a little bit of hate in their being. It is not bad to hate, since we all have emotions, and we can all hate, and this same hate can give us strength. But we should not let this feeling cloud our judgment. If you do not do something with your hate, well, I think you already know what will happen to you. Epic explained. The albino's tone of voice denoted wisdom as well as seriousness. Izuku just looked down at what the purple-eyed man said. "Well, let's not waste any more time and get started right away," he said with complete seriousness. At that, the freckled man noticed how his left fist was surrounded by a slight dark aura, and then he gave a strong blow to his own face. "Please," he said, pained by the blow from his own fist. Epic quickly got into the lotus position, looking at the green-haired man, who reflexively imitated his counterpart. "Okay, Hyper, now you have to go inside your soul and face your hatred, literally. While you do that, I'll keep your magic as stable as possible so there are no problems. Do you understand?" The albino explained and asked very seriously. "I understand." The green-haired man confirmed. Epic sat on the ground in a lotus position while closing his eyes. Izuku imitated the albino's position by closing his eyes. The bodies of both boys are surrounded by a light aura, purple in the case of Epic and black in the case of Hyper, at the same time that their souls appeared in front of them. While this was happening, Ink looked at both of them seriously. At that point the painter noticed how Cross was looking at the sky with a look that denoted seriousness and some concern. "What's wrong, Cross?" Ink asked. "The storm is coming," said the mixed-eyed man, still looking at the sky. Now we focus on Izuku. He was back in that completely dark and infinite place at first sight, which was the inside of his soul. However, it did not look the same as before. The place was now covered by a large amount of fog, making it a little difficult to see the boy. The atmosphere felt very heavy apart from the gloomy appearance it had. Izuku began to walk at a slow and steady pace, seemingly without any specific direction. In that infinite void, the only thing that could be heard was the echo produced by the firm steps of the freckled man. A serious look appeared on the boy's face when he saw how a few meters in front of him were two crimson-red lights illuminating the place. Izuku knew perfectly well who it was. He stopped walking when he was a few meters from those lights. When the boy stopped walking, the fog seemed to instantly move away, revealing the person Izuku was looking for. "Hello, Genocide," Izuku said coldly. He watched as his alter ego was kneeling on the ground with several chains of different colors, holding each of his limbs, preventing him from escaping, yet he slowly raised his head, showing his already typical psychopathic smile adorning his face. "Oh, you finally come to visit me, how nice. Do you have any idea how boring it is to be locked up here 24 hours a day?" the dark entity asked in a mocking tone. Izuku didn't say anything, he just kept his gaze fixed on the bright eyes of his alter ego. "Oh come on, at least say something, not even a hello or a hug," the red-eyed man said again in the same mocking tone. The green-haired man remained silent for a few seconds, not taking his gaze off the bright eyes of his alter ego. "You know why I'm here, let's put an end to this nonsense once and for all," the boy said with complete and utter seriousness. Hearing those words, Genocide's smile widened so much that it seemed like it was disfiguring his face. "Ha ha 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 ha, oh, I'm so glad to hear those words." As the red-eyed man spoke, the chains that kept him prisoner began to tighten. "I've been waiting for this moment so long." The chains began to crack due to the great force that Genocide imposed on them. "Now let the game begin." Finally it happened. The chains that kept the dark entity prisoner broke into thousands of pieces under Izuku's surprised gaze. The being of hate looked up, observing with his red eyes full of madness and hatred the boy in front of him. They both stared into each other's eyes seriously and coldly. The atmosphere became tense, to the point that the tension could be cut with a knife. That deathly silence was broken by the voice of Genocide that echoed in that dark void. You know, I haven't been wasting my time. Well, they and you kept me locked up. I started to absorb some of their magic, and thanks to that now I not only have my own hate magic, but I also have a bit of the magic of the other traits." The information just revealed by Genocide caused Izuku to open his eyes in surprise and nervousness. I guess you know what it means," he said as an aura of different colors began to surround the dark entity's body. "Unfortunately, he can't steal all of its magic, but if he asks, he can steal enough to achieve this. They say that the color black is the total absence of color, that it swallows all the light. Well, in this case that definition serves perfectly to describe what happened. Genocide's body had been covered by a blinding light, which was the colors of the other 7 souls. That colorful glow flooded that entire dark place. The colorful light seemed to create a beautiful scene in that deep darkness. It looked like a beautiful work of art. Izuku was forced to close his eyes due to the powerful light radiating from his alter ego. Suddenly, in the middle of all that light, a humanoid silhouette could be seen, the dark silhouette of Genocide. It only took a few seconds, between 2 and 3 seconds, for all that beautiful brightness to be absorbed and swallowed up in the dark silhouette of the entity. The next thing Izuku saw left him totally stunned. He saw how Genocide's dark silhouette had grown much larger, easily measuring 5 or 6 meters tall. The whole place had begun to shake as if it were an earthquake. The atmosphere had become very tense, followed by large and powerful gusts of wind generated by Genocide's transformation. The green-haired boy had to hold on tightly to the ground to avoid being blown away by the large waves of air. Genocide's new appearance had finally become visible. The freckled man had his eyes wide open as a drop of sweat ran down his forehead. He gulped nervously at the dark being before him. Genocide's new appearance was something difficult to describe. His new body was totally different. It was much larger than before, measuring between 4 and 6 meters. His hands were now large claws like those of a wild animal. Apart from the fact that his arms were separated from his body, it seemed that he had a kind of cape in which you could see a large black void. Only being adorned by many stars, it seemed to have some kind of armor with a heart in the center, but the most notable was his head, being that of a goat. However, this one had a much darker appearance. It had large horns, like those of a demon, a pair of marks under the eyes and extremely sharp teeth. In itself it resembled Izuku's supreme mode, except that this one was a darker and more twisted version. The new entity gave off a great aura of dark power which made Izuku sweat. Genocide's gaze was that of a great wild beast. The green-haired man at that moment, for an instant, felt afraid. He reflexively took a step back. His alter ego seemed to notice this as a large, deformed mocking smile appeared on his face. At that moment Izuku felt a hand rest on his shoulder. Feeling this, he quickly turned around only to open his eyes in surprise. It turns out that the one behind him was an adult version of him, who apparently seemed to be made of bright red magic. "Don't be afraid, Izuku. At this moment you must not back down, you must remain determined," the being said with a voice that conveyed self-confidence, and his eyes shone with enormous determination. "He well said, determination," another voice said. The green-haired man watched in shock as 6 other copies of him appeared, but they weren't like his ink or cross counterparts. They were him, but they seemed to be from different moments in his life, apart from the fact that each one was a different color. "You guys," Genocidal whispered with hatred, looking at the newcomers. You're so evil, Genocide. You organized this big party and you don't invite us," said the orange-colored Izuku, who was wearing his hero suit. He showed a bold and radiant smile, his eyes shining with bravery. "You won't face this alone, Izuku, after all this is our fight too," said the purple Izuku wearing the UA uniform. The green-haired man didn't know exactly what was happening, although he was already getting an idea. Without knowing why, he smiled. After so much time, he smiled again like before all this happened. He really smiled. "Sure, let's all go." But that shout, the bodies of the 7 Izukus turned into spheres of magic which entered the boy's body. A shiny white hairdryer, followed by a large pillar of magic, appeared on the scene. The pillar slowly shrank until it disappeared completely, revealing a pair of enormous wings that changed colors, followed by Izuku's new form. The boy had accessed his supreme mode. His presence and gaze radiated power and respect. Apart from a strange calm, this form, not being related to the soul of hatred, did not affect Izuku's personality, so he could fight without fear of losing control. Both beings stared at each other, being the same person and at the same time not, being so similar and at the same time different. Genocide looked with ferocity and bloodlust at his enemy. On the other hand, Izuku looked seriously and calmly at the being before him. That silence was broken when Genocide spoke, his voice echoing in that place. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" I asked arrogantly. Izuku remained silent for a few seconds before answering. "No, I don't think so, I know," he said with a look of determination. Chapter 21. Soul of Hatred. Inside Izuku's soul we can see how a fierce battle was breaking out between our green-haired protagonist against the personification of all the hatred he had accumulated throughout his life. Genocide appears in front of Izuku, giving him a powerful blow with bravery magic. The green-haired man uses a magic shield to protect himself, however the shield cracks a little due to the power of the impact. The dark being noticed this detail, smiling maliciously. Without resting, he began to deliver a rain of blows to the shield, which was beginning to give way under the force of the blows. 10 hits, 20 hits, 30 hits. But the final and devastating blow, Genocide manages to destroy Izuku's shield into pieces. Immediately afterwards, the being of hate grabbed Izuku by the face and began dragging him all over the place, as if he were a sack of potatoes. Genocide lifted Izuku by the face and then gave him a powerful kick, sending the boy flying several meters. The white-haired man with goat features summoned 2 white sabers, which he stuck into the ground to stop his body. "I rotted deep within you for over 10 years because of your weakness," he shouted furiously as he imposingly approached Izuku. "Not giving in to hatred is not weakness," he said angrily. "You have no right to say that after everything you've done." A mocking evil smile appeared on the goat-like entity's face. Izuku, even though he wouldn't admit it, knew that his alter ego was right. Because of his hatred he ended up in this situation. But his lines of thought were cut off when Genocide continued speaking. You knew my way was the right way. You always knew it, but when the time came to defend ourselves from those who wanted to hurt us, what did you do? Several memories of Izuku being humiliated by Bakugo flashed through both of their minds. What did you do, he asked, annoyed as several memories of Izuku being bullied by Bakugo and him doing nothing to stop it. Nothing. He finished saying coldly. You only bring trouble, it's not my fault. Izuku said angrily as he threw a large number of magic projectiles at his alter ego. Genocide began to fly at an incredible speed, managing to dodge several of those attacks, although he was not so lucky since a couple of them did hit their target, causing the dark being to take a couple of steps back. This one didn't stop there and kept going. Genocide summoned 2 black sabers, with which he attacked Izuku. Genocide launched a diagonal attack, but Izuku managed to block it with his own saber. In this way a hand-to-hand combat began between both beings. When their weapons collided, they generated a large amount of sparks. Both of them did not take their eyes off their opponent, one looking at each other seriously and the other with hatred. Both Izuku and Genocide begin to launch several slashes with their respective weapons, trying to land at least one hit on their opponent. The white-haired man was forced to move away from his opponent when he noticed that a kind of warning sign had appeared beneath him. Just as he moved away, a powerful bolt of magic struck at full power. Izuku watched as his alter ego was flying while looking at him with a mocking smile. I don't even know why you keep fighting, he exclaimed in the dark without erasing his mocking smile. I fight because I know it's the right thing to do, the boy of many souls said in a serious tone. Genocide's smile seemed to widen at what Izuku said, it almost seemed like he was going to laugh. How ironic that of all people, you're the one saying that. Izuku raised his head in confusion at what his alter ego said, you fight for what's right. What are you supposed to be now, a hero? Ha. At this point you don't even deserve to hold that title. The boy was about to answer when Genocide abruptly interrupted him, but first tell me, do you know what LV means? The freckled man's gaze showed confusion, he had seen those initials before, but he never knew what they were or what they meant. It's an acronym, it means level of violence, or level of violence, being in Spanish love, it is also an acronym, it means advancement of killing and hate without reason, it is a way of measuring someone's capacity to do harm, you level up by killing a certain number of people, the more you kill, the more you distance yourself. And the more you distance yourself the easier it is for you to kill and hurt others. Izuku couldn't help but show some surprise at this fact, revealing, what am I getting at by explaining all this? Well, it's simple, while you were killing you were distancing yourself, but not only from people, but from your silly hero codes. There came a point where you distanced yourself so much that you don't even act like one anymore, you let yourself be carried away by your hatred, and look where you ended up, where we both ended up. You don't deserve to be a hero. Izuku opened his eyes in shock at what Genocide said, he was right. However, the boy could not continue thinking when a shower of thousands of stars began to fall upon him. Using his wings he rose into the air and began to fly at enormous speed, however this was not so easy, this was because every time one of those stars hit the ground they exploded and split into several more stars. Because of this, Izuku received a large amount of these stars in many parts of his body. Although they didn't seem like it, those stars weren't harmless at all. For every star that hit him, he felt as if a car at full power had run him over. His armor was helping him withstand the attacks, however this would not last long. With a burst of speed, Izuku flew at full speed, managing to get in front of Genocide. Izuku, using a large amount of bravery magic in his fist, gave a strong blow to his alter ego. Because of this, the body of the dark being was launched like a missile, ending up crashing resoundingly against the ground, remaining embedded in it. Izuku knew that this wouldn't be enough, so he summoned some kind of weapon and began to shoot at point-blank range at Genocide, who was using some kindness magic to heal his shattered jaw from the blow he received. A huge beam of magic came out of Izuku's weapon and hit Genocide head-on. The white-haired man didn't wait and summoned a huge shower of lightning. This time it was Genocide's turn to dodge using his own wings. Once in the air, the dark being summoned his sabers again and used them to deflect the lightning. A huge amount of red knives appeared behind Genocide, and with a single movement of his hand, he sent them at full speed against his enemy. Izuku summoned one of his sabers in one hand and in the other a star that he used as a shield. Using his saber he managed to cut 4 knives that were going at full speed towards him, at the same time he used the star as a shield protecting himself from the other knives. When the boy finished with the knives he was ready to launch himself back against Genocide, however his alter ego was no longer anywhere. Damn, where is it? I asked into the air. Tell me, Izuku. Izuku turned his gaze seeing how his enemy was several meters above him while having a hand raised. Do you remember what the black soul is? It's hatred. As he said that a gigantic black sphere manifested in the dark entity's hand, and I have a lot of it to share. Without a shred of doubt, Genocide launched a massive attack against the white-haired man. Izuku looks seriously at this action of his enemy. The boy quickly summons a large skull with goat features, a hypergunner. The skull opened its mouth and instantly began to absorb the large sphere until nothing of the attack remained. When he had barely faded away his enemy's attack, the dark entity appeared in front of him at an impressive speed. Genocide tries to hit Izuku, however the white-haired man protects himself by creating a green shield in front of him. This action did not stop Genocide at all. In a burst of speed he disappeared and later reappeared behind the freckled man trying to connect another blow. Izuku noticing this quickly created another shield behind his back. This action was repeated when the entity of hate disappeared and reappeared again, but this time on Izuku's left side to hit him and be blocked again by another shield. The same thing happened when he reappeared and attacked from the right side. This time Genocide appeared above Izuku with his fist full of bravery magic. The boy created a larger shield to defend himself from the attack. Izuku's alter ego did not hesitate this time and hit the shield with all his might. When his fist hit the shield, large gusts of air were produced all over the place at the same time as the freckled man's shield began to crack little by little. Izuku began to put more magic into the shield to withstand the attack, while Genocide did not give in and applied much more force and magic in his blow, beginning to crack the shield more and more. Many gusts of air were generated by such a collision. The dark entity's fist began to be surrounded by a large amount of black rays, increasing the power of the attack. From 1 second to the next, Genocide's attack wins the fight, and Izuku's shield breaks into thousands of pieces, as if it were glass. The fist of the being of hate continued until it hit Izuku's stomach, leaving the boy stamped on the ground, also generating a small crater. Genocide didn't stop there, and with both fists wrapped in orange magic, he began to unleash a huge rain of blows that fell squarely on his opponent's body. Each blow, as fast as lightning and as strong as an earthquake, all impacted on Izuku's body. For every blow the boy received, his armor began to show several cracks, while at the same time many gusts of air were produced due to the force of impact. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" he exclaimed mockingly as he took flight, and while looking down at his enemy, he began to launch thousands of bursts of magic, almost resembling a machine gun. Izuku faced this and put his arms in an X shape to try to withstand the great rain of attacks. When one of these attacks hit, they created a huge explosion. Since there were so many, the whole place looked like a battlefield. "You can't defeat me, you're just a small part of my hatred," Genocide shouted with a demented smile. While this battle was taking place inside Izuku, in the real world Cross and Epic watched with concern as half of the green-haired man's body was covered by the substance of hatred. "Come on Hyper, you can do it, fight," said with concern for his friend. Back in the fight. Both opponents had once again launched themselves against each other in hand-to-hand combat, using their respective weapons, that is, their sabers. Genocide jumped trying to cut Izuku in half with his weapon. Izuku managed to block the attack with his own saber. Both of them jumped apart to launch themselves against each other almost immediately. Both of them launched to cut with their sabers, ending up generating another shock wave due to the impact. Izuku tried to sweep his opponent's legs, but he dodged this maneuver with a stop. The warning sign appeared beneath Genocide, and almost instantly a powerful bolt of lightning struck the entity of hate, causing significant damage. But Izuku didn't stop there. More and more signs formed on the ground, and therefore many lightning bolts began to fall all over the place. Genocide used a star as a shield as he approached his opponent at high speed. Once he reached Izuku, he launched a powerful kick. It should be noted that his foot was surrounded by blue magic. The white-haired man responded in the same way with a kick. When both attacks hit, a large shock wave was produced, and a small crater was formed under both opponents who were tired. "Damn, I can't go on like this forever, the magic I stole from the other traits is running out." Genocide thought seriously as he felt his magic reserves rapidly dwindling. "I must end this battle as soon as possible, I'm not used to using so much power in this form," Izuku thought as he began to get tired. The two took flight at a speed that even exceeded the speed of light. As both beings flew, they began to launch a large number of magical attacks at each other. Both Izuku and Genocide looked like a pair of comets. As they flew, they left a trail of light wherever they passed. The freckled man summoned many lightning bolts, which began to fall all over the place. Because of this, Genocide had to take evasive actions to dodge the powerful attacks. The amount of lightning was so much that the battlefield now looked like the center of a huge thunderstorm. Genocide summoned his black sabers again and attacked Izuku again. The freckled man summoned a shield of green magic and his own saber. Using his shield, he stopped his alter ego's attack, and with his weapon, he slashed the dark being's chest, causing significant damage. "Damn you!" Genocide shouted angrily, disappearing and then reappearing in the air. Izuku saw how his enemy's saber passed just millimeters from his face and then stuck in the ground. He thought that was the end of it. How wrong he was. The warning sign of enormous eyes appeared on the ground. It was so large that it measured almost an entire block, which caused Izuku to sweat nervously. A lightning bolt of biblical proportions struck the spot indicated by the sign, and as if the lightning were not enough, when it hit the ground, it generated an enormous explosion, followed by a huge gust of air, which was so powerful that Genocide had to be careful not to fly away. As the smoke from the explosion cleared, Izuku could be seen with several wounds, some blood coming out of his lip and forehead, and his armor with several cracks. Even the part that covered his right arm was missing. The boy was panting heavily due to the powerful attack, although well, Genocide wasn't much better, let's say. Damn, I used a lot of magic in that attack. If I continue like this, all the magic I stole will be completely depleted. I must end this fight as quickly as possible. The dark entity thought seriously while breathing tiredly. Genocide's claws turned a deep red color. With his claws he created some kind of deep red cuts. In a flash of speed he appeared behind Izuku with some kind of pipes in his hands. Without hesitation he began to shoot thousands of magic bullets at Izuku, who defended himself with a green shield. However, the boy could notice how for a second his enemy's claws flashed red, and in that he remembered the cuts that his alter ego had created previously. A distraction. But it was too late when he realized. When Izuku realized this, it was too late. The cuts had hit his back, causing great damage. After that he received a strong right hook from Genocide, followed by a blow to the stomach that made him spit blood, to finish with a powerful kick that sent Izuku flying several meters. The white-haired man breathed heavily and tiredly as he stood up with difficulty. He could feel his own blood coming out of the corners of his lips and staining the floor. Wait, it was inside his soul. How could he even bleed? Author. Because I want to and because I feel like it. But seriously. Izuku was barely standing. He looked at his opponent, who was also in his last moments. Genocide breathed deeply, feeling his magic drain away. At that moment, when they found themselves in such conditions, they knew that the next attack would be the last. This ends here. They both shouted as they began to charge their most powerful attacks with all the magic they had left. I'm going to drag you to my special hell. Genocide screamed, completely furious. Izuku charged all his magic in both hands. He put his hands extended in front, preparing his most powerful technique, the final lightning. For his part, Genocide also charged all his magic in his right hand. His attack was surrounded by a kind of black flame, and his claws glowed with a hellish red. They both knew that the next attack would decide everything. Both of them already had their attacks ready, and at that moment, both unleashed their full power. Izuku launches his final ray, and Genocide releases a gigantic amount of red magic, surrounded by a kind of black flame. The two attacks collide with each other, creating a power wave of catastrophic levels. Neither of them landed. Genocide increases the power of his attack. And Izuku also raises the power of the final lightning. The force is such that the entire place begins to shake as if they were in the middle of a huge earthquake. The power wave is at its limit. It is about to destabilize. The wave of power can't hold out any longer, and that's when. Boom. Special effects from 2099 XD, and here the song ends. The wave of power had caused an explosion of biblical proportions. And now both beings were back in their base state, without a single shred of magic. They were both badly injured and could barely move. It was practically a miracle that they hadn't fainted. Both of them barely raised their heads, looking at their opponent. They both wanted to stand up and finish each other off. But they couldn't, they were too hurt. God, I must say that was a good battle. Izuku laughed with difficulty, looking at his alter ego with a mocking smile. For the first time you're right, idiot. Genocide smiled with mockery and hatred, looking at the green-haired man. The green-haired man let out a bitter laugh at what his alter ego said. My god, I can't believe where my life has come to. I never thought I could have this kind of problems. I'm still trying to get used to these feelings. Izuku said, referring to everything he's been feeling for the past few months. A macabre smile formed on Genocide's face upon hearing this. Then forget about them. The freckled man looked at his alter ego, who was looking at him with a mocking smile. Although I must admit, it sure took you a while to ask for my help. Genocide exclaimed as a Machiavellian expression formed on his face. I didn't ask you for anything. The freckled man replied, frowning at his alter ego. The being of hate remained silent for a second, without erasing his Machiavellian expression, before responding. Are you sure? The red-eyed man's tone showed that he found his other half's words funny. Your emotions are making you weaker, and you know it. Besides, I'm much more aware of the situation than you. I know we can't face a monster without first becoming one ourselves. The dark entity's smile only grew bigger and more sinister with each word that came out of his mouth. That's why you need me, because you know that a good-for-nothing crybaby like you would never make a significant change in a situation like this. Genocide's gaze became more serious and gloomy. Stop pretending you're one of them, stop pretending you forgot what we did, the lives we took. Memories of Izuku working as a mercenary and killing multiple of his targets flashed through both of their minds, and the enemies we made. The memory of the battle against horror flashed through both boys' minds. If you put your emotions aside, we would be invincible. With all your power, we are equal after all. Genocide showed a macabre expression again, as with his last strength he approached Izuku and extended his hand. The green-haired man had his gaze downcast with the shadow of his hair covering his eyes. He slowly brought his hand closer until he took his alter ego's hand. Genocide smiled evilly at this. But in that, from one second to the next, Izuku pulled a being of hatred by the arm and then grabbed him by the neck while looking at him seriously. I know I'll never forget what I did, but I refuse to lose everything a second time. Even when I hit rock bottom, I'll have friends who will be there to support me, and when it's my turn to protect them, it won't be power that will drive me forward. It will be my love for them that will be the only thing that will force me to surpass my limits. Izuku exclaimed with a look full of determination, however his gaze had changed. It wasn't the serious and cold look he had shown since his betrayal. No, it was the look he had before he was betrayed, the look of the old Izuku. You're making the same mistake again, you idiot, the same mistake that got you betrayed in the first place. What Genocide said caused Izuku to open his eyes in surprise, but without taking his serious gaze off. But thanks to that decision I was able to at least see how cruel the world can be. Izuku said with a sad look. The boy released Genocide, who stepped back, looking seriously at the green-haired man. It's true that not everything in life is solved by being kind. From that moment I realized how cruel the world can be. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, there is sadness, regret, fear, death, and yet there are these moments, small moments of joy for which it is worth living and defending. I want to feel happiness, I want to feel love, but not as the Izuku I am now. But as the Izuku I was before all this happened. Even you agreed to defend everyone, give them hope and save them. With a smile you agreed with that dream. The freckled boy's gaze denoted sadness and nostalgia as he looked at his alter ego. Genocide had a surprised look at what Izuku said. "TCH, you're an idiot for thinking like that," said the being of hate with a neutral look. I guess I am one. I have this feeling that if I grow up once and for all, things will work out one way or another," Izuku exclaimed with a calm smile. "Ugh, I'd love to see that," the dark entity replied sarcastically. "Then let me show you, we'll be together forever anyway, literally, haha." The freckled man had extended his hand to Genocide, his voice now sounded calm and at peace, a peace he hadn't had in a long time. His alter ego watched this action with noticeable surprise. Genocide slowly raised his hand, nervously looking at the boy in surprise. "Yeah, sure, whatever, don't touch me with your crybaby hands," she exclaimed, crossing her arms and frowning at the green-haired man. Izuku just let out a small laugh at this. "So you're not going to deny me anymore?" Genocide asked with a small tone of hope in his voice. "That's what I've been doing wrong all my life. You're part of my Genocide, whether you like it or not. Let's try to make sure we can both enjoy our lives," the Emerald Eye answered calmly. For his part, the being of hate only let out a heavy and deep sigh to look at Izuku with a neutral gaze. "Okay." Izuku smiled happily at this answer. "That doesn't mean I like you," he shouted genocidally at the green-haired boy, who laughed at this. "Stop wasting your time and then go ahead, idiot." The freckled man just nodded at this and then disappeared from that place, leaving Genocide behind. The hateful entity just let out a sigh and, without him realizing it, a small tear of happiness came out of his left eye. Finally, back in the real world, Izuku's body was completely covered in the substance of hatred, greatly alarming the white-haired men. However, all the substance disappeared and the green-haired man stood up, showing his red eyes against a black background, but these were different from his normal hate mode. This time there were no black tears, apart from the fact that those eyes did not shine with sadism or evil, but with calm and determination. "Hyper?" Ink asked nervously. Izuku stared at his friends for a few seconds and then gave a huge smile, one like the ones the old Izuku gave who had returned. The boy felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He could feel himself becoming his old self again, free from his hatred. "Hey guys, what did you miss?" Izuku asked, amused with a big smile. His white-haired friends were surprised by this attitude. "Hyper, what happened to your hatred, is it gone?" Epic asked seriously but at the same time confused. The green-haired boy, without erasing his smile, looked at the violet eye and then pointed with his thumb to his chest, more specifically his heart. He didn't leave, I just accepted him, he was always a part of me and always will be," said the freckled boy with a smile. Ink, Cross, and Epic smiled happily at this. However, at that very moment the four boys felt like several magical presences, all evil and very powerful, were present and they were all in the same place, the UA. Damn, they've already appeared. Craw said seriously. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's kick their bony asses. Izuku exclaimed with a challenging smile. The other three Izuku smiled in agreement with their friend's idea, and in this way the four of them teleported to the UA to fight what would undoubtedly be the final battle. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.